We recently bought 1.7 acres to build our dream homestead, and today I'm going to share with you the biggest things to consider before buying your land for your homestead. Hey guys, welcome back to Mini Urban Farm, a channel about gardening and homesteading in the suburbs. Today I am going to be sharing with you the things that I wish I would have known before buying this piece of property for homesteading, for our dream home, the things that, we took into consideration, the things that we found you should take into consideration, but I don't know about if we really did or not, that sort of thing. So this video is going to be specific to buying property for a homestead, right? Not buying property to develop into an RV park or buying any other type of property, but something that you want to have animals on and a garden and that sort of thing. So if that is what you are trying to do, this is how we were able to do that. All right, so when we first got into, the idea that we wanted to buy land for our homestead, we had absolutely no clue what we were doing, and we searched a lot on the internet to try and find this property and see what it was that we actually needed for a homestead, right? There was even less information on that. But even just buying a piece of property, we both didn't want to get into something that we, spend a lot of money up front on this piece of property and then we can't use it and have to try and sell it, or, it has a lot of problems or that sort of thing. So right off the bat, you can see this property is pretty cleared with the exception of all of these pine trees. When we bought the property, it was completely forested. None of this was bare. This is pretty much our driveway leading into the property. Just because we drive on it so much, it created like this natural driveway, and this is the only path that didn't have a whole bunch of trees on it, so it just ended up being the driveway. Now, we removed a lot of this. We had to learn how to use a brush hog, how to clear out the property, what plants we wanted to keep, that sort of thing. So that was definitely step one. If you are buying property, decide if you want something that is completely cleared or you want something that has a lot of trees on it. We decided to be open. I definitely wanted a lot of trees on it, but at the same time, we didn't want to have to remove tons and tons of trees. It just so happened that we got a property that has these massive pine trees on it, a lot of oak trees as well, and we, decided to move forward with it and do the clearing. So it was pretty much forested land. I will say clearing land is expensive, which is the main consideration to keep in mind. This is actually back there somewhere is not our property. That is the neighbor's property. We live in suburbia, so there will be a giant fence along the entire area. This is our property before we have a house on it or anything. We are working with an architect right now, but the land, the house is going to go over there somewhere behind where the truck is. And it is 357 feet that way, and then across it is, I think, 170 feet, something like that. So it's 1.7 acres total. All right, so the main thing is the first thing is if the land is clear, you're gonna have to figure out how to get trees on it, right? Because I'm sure you don't wanna just live, I don't wanna just live on a piece of land that has absolutely no trees, and clearing land is going to be your first expense if you're buying land that is forested for homestead. It costs us thousands of dollars to get this cleared out. And the trees, the massive trees, we removed ourselves. I don't want to say massive because all of these pretty much stayed, but the bigger trees we removed ourselves in addition to paying somebody else to come clear the land. And we have additionally rented a brush hog on several occasions to clear out the smaller brush so we can actually use the property to plant things out. So that is probably something that you want to consider before you start looking for land, or if you have looked for land, consider the expenses, surrounding it. If you found a piece of property that you really love, that you have fallen in love with, are you going to spend a lot of money on planting out a whole bunch of trees that you want, or are you going to spend a lot of money on clearing the land to make it what you want? That's something that you're gonna have to think about before you start this entire process, and then just move forward from there. The second up is utilities. So anything like water and power, cable, internet, things like that. Septic, you're going to have to figure out if the property does not have that, what do you do about that? This property is raw land. No septic, no water, no anything. Which is why we had to put in a water retention system, a rain barrel system. So we took this, I'm making my way over there, we took this 55-gallon drum with some gutters and everything. This is our rain barrel system. It's propped up on like this little makeshift table thing here, and the gutters, this pipe over here, I don't know if you can see it, it's a little blown out. Let me turn the camera around. So this captures all of our water. It is 55 gallons and it rolls off of the chicken coop into this massive gutter, or regular size gutter, I guess. And it comes out with a spigot so that not only can we give our chickens water, but we can also wash our hands and do whatever else we need if, you know, it's a problem. So clearly, if you're going to live on the land, you're going to need power and water and septic and all of that. We don't live on this property currently. We're still in the plans, you know, we're still getting our plans drawn up with the architect to begin the construction of the dream house. However, in the meantime, we have chickens on here and they need to drink water, and it was getting really tiresome to have to try and lug all of the water in buckets from the house, driving over here and then give them water. So we set up that rain barrel system. It is enough water that the automatic water system can pretty much provide for the chickens year round. We don't really have a problem with that, but we are going to have to set up a well and a septic. We do have power on this property, not like actually power on the property, but there's power lines. So if you're in a very rural area, that might be a concern. You might not have that sort of thing. So check, you know, before you buy the property, does it have a well? Does it have a septic? Is there an old well or old septic on the property that you can use or restore or something like that? If not, you're going to have to pay anywhere between $5,000 and $10,000 for a well, for a septic, sometimes even more than that. So count that as an additional expense. If you're building a homestead, that will need to be rolled up into the cost of building. And if you can repair whatever it is on the property, or if it already has water, septic, power, that is just something you don't have to pay for. So we decided we love this property so much that we are willing to deal with it, but definitely not the easiest route to take. All right, next up to consider when buying your property for homesteading is how much land you realistically need. I have heard people say that you need at least 5 acres for homesteading. I have heard you need at least 10, and definitely while there are some restraints, you know, if you want to have cattle, you can't do it on a 1/4 acre of land, more than likely. That would be something I'd be very interested to see somebody do, to have an entire cattle farm on a 1/4 acre of land. Probably not going to happen though. So if you want to have a certain type of thing on your property, you're going to have to accommodate for that. But we are homesteading on a suburban lot right now, and this property is 1.7 acres, which is plenty for what we want it for. You don't need a certain number of acres in order to homestead, but depending on what your goals are, if you want to raise cattle, you will need a lot more land than if you're just looking for chickens. So try to, you know, account for whatever goals you have, and of course goals change, but if you think someday down the road you want a dairy farm or a, you know, cattle operation to raise your own meat for your family, try to get something that is a little bit on the larger side. That was not going to happen in this area that we are, you know, deciding to stay in. So we kind of, you know, not that I want to raise cattle to begin with, but that is something that we have not really taken into our goals. So right now on this property, just to give you an idea, on 1.7 acres, we have a area for the house, which is upwards of 3,000 square feet or so. I think it's like 3,500 square feet, around that range. That is going to be in the back part of the property. We have an area for our food forest, which is about 7,000 square feet. If you didn't see the tour of the food forest, go check it out. I will leave the link over here. This is the before video of, you know, setting up all of our food forest and our trees and all of that. So that's 7,000 square feet. We also have dedicated an area to our chickens and our animals. So that is going to include everything like turkey, quail, goats eventually, our chickens, and rabbits hopefully, and even maybe some ducks. Take into account, if you want to have animals, you know, how much space do you need for each type of animal. You can raise rabbits in a pretty small space, but if you're looking for goats, you might need more space. So add up all the kind of square footage requirements you needed for all of the animals you want to keep, and decide, you know, if I want all of these, do I need a bigger property? The answer is probably going to be yes, if you want a whole bunch of animals like I do, but 1.7 acres seems to be a good amount for what we want to do. We're also going to have a kitchen garden, which Elle and I are still compromising on exactly how big that kitchen garden is going to be. My previous garden in the old house was about 450 square feet. My garden right now is like, I don't know, tiny, because we live with my grandmother right now, so we don't have much of a garden. But in this property house, in our homestead, the kitchen garden is probably going to be around 2,500 to 3,000 square feet, which is a pretty decent sized garden in the suburbs. So just keep into consideration what you must have on your homestead before committing to a certain acreage of land. All right, so next is where the property is actually located, right? So if you start looking in a certain area and you fall in love with the property, is that the area you actually want to be in? For us, we decided we are going to stay in this area because it is where our family is. It is close enough to our jobs that if we need to go into the office, we can actually commute there. That is a pretty big one, because if you live, in an area and you have a job that's outside of the homestead, like many of us suburban homesteaders do, then you will likely have to go into the office at some point in time to actually do your job and get paid. So where is this property that you decided on, right? Or you're looking for? If you decided you want to be close to a big city or within an hour drive of the airport, like we do, right? Travel is a big part of our lifestyle, and we want to make sure we're not driving 4 hours to an airport. You want to make sure that all of these things are within that vicinity before you decide. So a few of the big ones that we considered when we were actually looking was, how far is it from doing groceries, right? Because I happen to like the pickup. I like driving the 10 minutes to the grocery store and getting pickup already and just put in my car and coming back. That's not something that I'm willing to sacrifice in order to drive 3 hours to the nearest grocery store because we're in a rural environment. No, that is definitely not for me. If it is, and if you're able to produce all of your own food on the homestead, then more power to you. But for me and for my family, we decided we wanted to be close to groceries, as close as possible actually. So we are about 10 minutes away from the nearest grocery store here, which is perfect. And an airport, that is a major one for us. We're about 45 minutes to an hour from the major, from the nearest major airport, which is fine with us. I used to live within 15 minutes of the airport. That is way too close to the city for my taste now, but 45 minutes to an hour works out just fine. Also consider, if you have kids, what kind of other neighbors are around, if there's going to be enough activities for them, like soccer or basketball or whatever it is that they're into, if that's something you even want to include in the lifestyle that you live, because a lot of kids that grow up in rural areas, they don't necessarily have that stuff around just by default. So that is something that we want our kids to be involved in activities, and we want to not have to drive an hour and a half to get there. So that was one of the main factors in wanting to stay here. Also family, we like having family around, and they are about a 15-minute drive from this property, so that was a big selling point. And then lastly, the overall time to actually make it into a big city. So we're in Central Florida. The nearest major city is about half an hour to 45 minutes away, and that allows us to get dressed up and go out to nice dinners, and that was something that I was not going to sacrifice no matter how many acres of property we were able to get somewhere else. So the ability to actually get dressed up and go somewhere on a moment's notice, that is something you will sacrifice if you're in a more rural environment. We live in the suburbs now currently, in our current house, or our previous house, and my grandmother's house is in the same neighborhood, but this property is not too far away from that. So while it is still a more rural feeling, right, you don't see anybody here behind me, this is kind of quiet over here, and there's not too many neighbors around, but it is still within driving distance to pretty much everything, which is something that was really important to us. All right, and the last thing that you need to take into consideration, and this is something that I think gets left off a lot of lists, right, when people are actually considering buying a property, right? Once you've actually once you've actually found the property, how does that property make you feel? And I'm not trying to get all like therapist-y on you and all, all that stuff. I'm off the clock. But how does that property actually make you feel? Because if you're here and you don't like the vibe of it, like, you're not going to want to live here. We love this property, and to demonstrate how much we love being at this property, I am going to come over here and show you what Alan is doing right now. Alan is over here in his hammock, relaxing, doing some work because he's connected to the hotspot on his phone. And we're underneath all of these beautiful trees, and the birds are chirping, and our chickens are over here making noise somewhere by the truck. But it is just such an amazing feeling being out here, and even though there's a car driving by, we can barely hear that over there. It's just far enough away where we don't get that noise. So being here on this property, how does that make you feel, Alan?
Happy and relaxed.
Happy and relaxed. That's how your property should make you feel before, during, and after you buy it. All right, so those are all the things that I think you really need to take into account before you buy your property. If you're looking for homesteading land, those are the main ones. There might be a few smaller ones. you know, like if there's problems with the soil, if you need a soil test, that sort of thing. But for the most part, that is everything that we took into in consideration to homesteading. If you have others that you've considered, feel free to drop them in the comments below, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.